If you ask people what should you upgrade, CPU or GPU, most of the time they will tell you to buy a new graphic card. If you multitask a lot, a new CPU with more cores will help your life easier. But if gaming is your priority and you have a decent Intel CPU, a new graphic card will be a better choice. But what I'm gonna do today is absolutely useless. I just wanna do it because I will swap my CPU out as the 7700K is too hot in the summer. I will combine the Pentium CPU with a GTX 1080 Ti, and that's all. This video is for people who buy everything and run out of money before they can buy a new chip. So the chip I'm gonna use is the Pentium Kaby Lake G4620, clock at 3.7 GHz. If you check user benchmark, you can see this CPU performs similarly to the i3 6100 in the 6th generation and the golden Pentium G5400 in the 8th generation. So these three CPU are the same with the exact clock speed. I'm using Trident Z RGB, clocking at 33 MHz. So beside the CPU, everything is almost top of the line. The monitor I'm using is the Asus 144Hz 1080p. This resolution will keep more stress on the CPU. Also, to keep the CPU focused only on gaming, I use a capture card to record video on my laptop, so there is no performance loss. I use Fraps to display FPS. I don't use MSI Afterburner because it keeps my game stuttering. The first is CSGO. This game runs pretty good. FPS is vary from 160 to 240. You cannot reach 300, but I think for the refresh rate of this monitor, it's pretty good. So I estimated the average FPS for this game is around 200 to 220 FPS. Here are the settings that I use for my Grand Theft Auto 5. Everything is set to very high, not ultra. I don't like ultra. So you can see that there's a part that it dropped below 60, but the average FPS I must say around 70, which is not bad, but it just bottleneck my graphic card too hard, because I usually get around 120 FPS with my 7700K. Here's my graphics settings for The Witcher 3, my favorite game. Everything is set to Ultra. But what surprised me was I thought this Witcher 3 was a graphic card based game. So basically you can throw a very powerful graphic card and don't need a very good CPU and the game still run fine. But if you enter a crowded area where NPC or there's a lot of activities around your character, you can see that my FPS dropped very quite low, but it's playable. For this game, if you don't enter a big city like Novigrad, for example, and just running around in the jungle hunting monster, most of the time the game will stay above 60 FPS, but sometimes it freezes like you see in this gameplay. But the average I still think is around 65. Watchdog 2. Here's my graphics settings. Almost everything are set to very high. However, Ubisoft's games tends to use a lot of CPU power, so these games perform pretty badly. So I stopped with this game right there because driving around the city only gave me average of 30 FPS. It's another example of how Ubisoft games are very stressful for your CPU. This game is quite old, but a 2-core 4-thread chip cannot make your gameplay smoothly, especially when you try to move the mouse around. This cannot be shown on the video, but if you try this game, moving the mouse to look around always has some delays. This would be one of my favorite Assassin's Creed, despite the glitch and performance. By the way, the average for this game I think should be around 70, if you ignore the mouse delay. Another old Ubisoft game but with great graphic, Far Cry 4, but this game performs way incredibly. With the 1080 Ti and this setting, the game just ignored my weak CPU and sometimes it hit over 100 FPS.
Those men with the hoods, they are not like the rest of the army. They're faster, deadlier.
Like Witcher 3, of course when you enter crowded places, their FPS will drop. But for this game, I can say the average should be at least 85. I cannot know exact what number, because it's up and down between 60 and 120. Yeah, let's say 85. Hello, this is Assassin's Creed Origins. If you plan to use this CPU and you have your game installed on a mechanical hard drive, forget it. It will take forever for this game to be loaded. It took me around 2 minutes and 40 seconds to load back to the game after I died.
They will attack on sight here.
Then I use Senu the bird to look around for the enemy. Then I hit escape to go back to Bayek. It took forever to go back to load, so I basically gave up. After putting this game into my NVMe drive, the game could finally run. So if you plan to play this game, you need to upgrade your CPU, or you have to install it in a SSD. The mechanical hard drive will not work.
Consumationen! Salite ivi!
When this game released, people said, oh, it's bad for the CPU. You need a very good CPU to play, but the average is around 50, and I think it's pretty good. Next is Far Cry 5. Same story like Assassin's Creed Origins. I could not load the game without putting it into my NVMe drive. Firstly, I will benchmark it in high settings, and then I will benchmark in ultra settings. So let's say I really hate the game's ending and the whole game in general. So let's say the average FPS is just around 35 to 40 with high setting. Wolfenstein II, this game should be considered one of the best games ever made. Not only the action, the gameplay, the story is so good, but also thanks to its performance on this weak CPU. This is the only AAA title that can give a 2-core 4-thread CPU like this a 300 FPS maximum. So if you have never played this before, I highly recommend you to try it out.
Seth's gotta be more careful with his experiments.
Average for this game? Around 200 plus? From this video, you can see that a weak CPU can bottleneck a good graphic card really badly. So which should you upgrade? For me personally, I will go for a better chip. Why? It can boost my FPS tremendously. Also, the price for a new motherboard and a new CPU are always cheaper than a new high-end graphic card. However, next week the new NVIDIA RTX 2080 will be released, so it's time to throw all your money to the new graphic card, I think. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.